Hello everyone, Alvaro Perez here. I'm back with another video tutorial on how to use design software for KDP. I've been focusing on Illustrator so far in this challenge. Today I thought I'd switch over to Photoshop so that my Photoshop people out there wouldn't feel neglected. Hopefully this will be the first of many tips and tricks videos on using Photoshop, so I hope you guys will stick with me. So really quickly, if you could say hi to my tarantulas. This is Darwin, Peggy Sue, and Pixel, and we can get started. So I'm going to go to Open. I'm going to scroll through some of my public domain images here and select something to work with. So here we go. We have this crashing wave on these rocks here. So I got a suggestion within the challenge from Diana Balestra. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Diana. If not, correct me in the comments. And she wanted to know if there were any tips and tricks on how to enhance type and text so it doesn't seem so flat. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks for that here. First thing I want to do is open my layers palette. Actually, the first thing I want to do is go to my navigator, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Now I'll go to my layers palette, and I'm going to unlock the background so I can actually use this image here. And then once I have the background unlocked, it becomes layer 0. And then here's a cool little trick. You can grab any layer and drag it to the new layer button, and it duplicates that layer for you. So now I have 2 copies of this same image, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to close the eye on this bottom layer until we're ready to use it. Okay, so now I'm going to select my type tool. I'm going to click somewhere on my image, and then I'm going to type in the word splash. Click the checkbox to accept, and there we go. I'm going to get my selection tool, and I can kind of move this around where I want. Okay, pretty plain. So I'm going to go back to my layers palette. And now I'm going to right-click on my text and go to Blending Options at the top. Okay, so at the very top over here, you have what's called Blending Options, and that's what the information over here in this window is. I'm going to do a separate video for that. In this video, I want to focus on some of the styles, layer styles over here. So I'm going to start with Bevel and Emboss. So if you guys keep an eye on the text up here, you'll see what happens when I click on Bevel and Emboss. And it gives you that 3D effect, right? Like it's raised off of the background, okay? And then you have settings here to change that around. You have the style. There's the inner bevel, outer bevel, emboss, and a couple of other options beyond that. I'm going to stick with inner bevel for this one. And then you can have a smooth bevel, hard chisel, or soft chisel. Okay, and again, I'm going to stick with smooth for this. You can change the size of the bevel, right? You can get really dramatic with it. And you can also soften it. But I'm going to keep this all the way to the left for this example, and I'm going to put the size back down. Okay. You can also use your arrow keys for that. So let me go back a little further. Okay, so there's my bevel. Now I'm going to come down here and click on Drop Shadow. Okay, click on it to pull up the parameters over here. You can see what happened already back here with the parameters that are set here. It's giving you a preview because I have the preview box checked. Okay, so you can see the difference. You can change the opacity, right, if you want it darker. Now, one thing to keep in mind, people tend to really overdo it with these effects. You want something to be subtle. Okay, so I'm going to overdo it just a little bit just to make sure you can see it. Distance, how far that shadow is from the words. See, like that's overdoing it. I'm going to keep it close over here. The spread, keep that somewhat low, and then the size. How big is that drop shadow? Okay, so I'll do something like that. Now, I have the option, any of these styles over here that have a plus box next to them, you can have multiple instances of it. So I'm going to click on this drop shadow beneath it, and I'm going to change the color. Okay, and since we're working with water, I want to do something that pulls out some of the greens or the cool colors that you would see in the water. So I'll do something like that. So let me pull this down just a little further. I'm going to click OK. Pull this down so we can see our preview, and I'll play with these parameters again. So there's the distance, too much. Oh, my opacity is too high, that's what it is. I want this to be subtle, so I'm going to move my opacity down. So it's very subtle. Play with the distance, spread, and the size of it. I'm really just giving my shadow a little bit of a green tint. And then I'm going to click OK. You can see what that did to my text over here. I'm going to go back to my selection tool. Move this around so you can see the effect it has over different parts of this background. Okay. So that's one way to get your text to stand out against an image. So let me show you something a little bit more advanced now. If you recall, I had two identical layers. So I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to drag it up on top of my text. So now my text is sandwiched in between two instances of this same photograph. Okay. On my top layer of this image, I'm going to right click and I'm going to select Create Clipping Mask. And you'll see that the result is that now it cut away everything outside of our text, and our text is now a shape that is clipping that image, right? So the splash is now found only within the word splash. And this is kind of cool because you can now take your selection tool. You can move that image around within your text. You could also do it the other way and actually select the text and move the text around your actual image. And just a word on design, the word splash over here, that's half on the rocks and half on this kind of white crashing wave, is going to have a much different effect than if we did it up here, all on the water with some of the horizon in the background, maybe some of the dirt, and then the crashing wave in the sea. So you can just kind of scroll around with this thing and find what you like. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to actually add a white or a black background so you can see what it looks like against a solid color. So I'm going to click on New Layer, and I'm going to drag it down and make sure it's on the bottom. I'm going to come to my Paint Bucket tool, click on my image, and you'll see now what it looks like against a black background. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with white now so you can see the difference. I'm going to click, and this is what it looks like against a white background. And finally, I'm going to activate that bottom instance of the crashing wave image, and you'll see what happens. And that's kind of cool because you now have the same image repeated outside the words and inside the words, but since we added that beveled edge and the drop shadows, no matter where we move that word, you can still kind of make out what it says. So that's using a clipping mask to enhance your text. As always, I welcome your comments, your questions, and your suggestions. Have a good day.